The issue is, get in touch with it and say to yourself, is that the expectation I want? Because my expectations are going to radically influence you. I'll either make you a section 2, and I'll blossom you, or I will squash you, and I'll not even know it. So get control of them, because you already have them, and set them. Number 2, expectations impact ourselves and others. Expectations impact ourselves and others. In other words, what you believe yourself impacts you. And I saw this to be true. You know, you've heard the word placebo? Placebo is a sugar pill. And doing some research on this, we found that until 1890, 90-some% of all the pills the doctors gave to my grandfather and said, this will make you better, he was lying. They were sugar pills. And if the person was a little bit sick, they gave them little pills. And if they were really sick, they gave them these great big green things. And they'd have to have the patient really believe to make them better. So they would say things like this: you need to get up every 4 hours, right on through the night. And for the next 3 days, every 4 hours, you take one of these pills. Of course, the patient gets up every 4 hours and does this. 90% of all the pills. That is, the belief of the patient was more important than the drug. I was telling this in Baltimore. And the man sitting right here broke out laughter. I mean, he didn't laugh a little bit. He laughed, and he was all by himself. And I looked at him, and he looked at me and kept on smiling. And I said, sir, what's on your mind? And he says, I'm a physician, and nothing's changed. I said, nothing's changed? He said, no, it's more important what the patient believes than the expectations influence you. Therefore, get in control of them. All right, let's move on to the next one. Expectations are rooted in the past, influence the present, and therefore impact the future. They impact the future. I'll take a look at that. There's 3 tenses there. Where do we get them from? We get them from something that took place in the past. We heard something about somebody. We saw them do something. It happened. Then it says, and it influences the present. That is, I have that expectation about you or the class or whatever, and it influences you, and therefore it impacts the future. It impacts the future.
Maybe you're a 4th grade Sunday school teacher, and you've been hearing about the 3rd grade class that's going to be promoted up. And there's one little boy that everybody's been talking about. His name is Tony. Well, there are 3 different 4th grade Sunday school classes, and you teach one of them. You've been hoping and praying all year long that Tony would not be promoted to your class. Well, the big day finally comes, and you're over at the door of your classroom to welcome these precious little kids in. And finally, the first one comes. Oh, Mary, it's so nice to have you here, sweetheart. Why don't you come on and sit down the front and be with me? Well, who is this? It's so nice to see you. And what's your name?
I'm Johnny Brown.
Johnny Brown. Well, I know your parents. And don't you look really nice today? I mean, you are so cute. Why don't you come with me and come sit over here next to Mary, right here? Oh, who's that?
Hi.
Well, what's your name, little boy?
Tony.
What? You're Tony? All right, Tony, I want you to come with me right over here, young man. Come on, come along. And I want you to sit right here so I can keep my eye on you. Well, how did that teacher hear about Tony in the first place? He didn't know about him. He heard about it from the other teachers. He never even met him before. Well, here comes this cute little boy to Sunday school class. I mean, he's hoping that this year he's going to do it right. He's not going to get in trouble. And then he reacts to his teacher's expectations. Tony, you better behave yourself, young man, or I'm going to get your parents. I mean it. Do you see what the teacher's doing? The teacher expects him to do what? To misbehave. So guess what little Tony begins to do? I can't believe it. I mean, you're living up to your reputation right now. You're just trouble waiting to happen, young man. And I prayed all year that you wouldn't be in my class. Tony finally becomes Tony the Terror. You see, my friends, our expectations have an unbelievable impact. In fact, they can have an impact that lasts a lifetime.
Let's move on to number 4. Expectations are exposed through our attitudes and our actions. To our attitudes and our actions. That is, we don't even know what we do, but if we have low expectations, we'll behave in certain ways. Through careful research, they began to find out that there's some predictable patterns that if I have a low expectation about you, and I have a high expectation about you, and I never say a word, what I'll do to you is totally different. If I have a low expectation to you, and you raise your hand and ask me a question, I will go, and then I'll work on my notes, yes, Now, if you ask me the question, I won't even look at my notes. I'll come and I'll just listen to you. If you give me an answer that's wrong, I will say to you, good. It wasn't good. It was wrong. This person gives the wrong answer. You'll say, well, that's not quite it, but it's almost it. Let me give you another hint. This person, I lean back to. This person, I lead forward to. If you give me a test, and it could be right or wrong, I'll mark it wrong. It could be right or wrong, I'll mark it right. I mean, on and on and on. Therefore, your expectations and my expectations are exposed in ways we don't know we're doing it. Number 5, expectations influence the future, whether they're stated or unstated. Whether they're stated or unstated. That is, I don't have to say a word to you for my expectations to influence people. Well, here's a cute cartoon about expectations. Maybe you've had to speak one time with an audience like this. You get up to speak, and the gong show is there ready, just waiting for you to blow it. What are their expectations on you? That you're not going to be good, and I can't wait to blow the horn on you. They influence the future, whether they're stated or unstated. In other words, you don't have to tell anybody your expectations. They come out. Number 6, expectations impair others if they're set too low or too high for too long.
It seems like we're always looking for balance, aren't we? And I guess it's the same with expectations. You know, not too high, not too low, or not for too long. For instance, parents do it all the time. Maybe you've walked into your 13-year-old daughter's bedroom lately, and for the life of you, you can't find the bed. You know there's a bed in there somewhere, but you can't find it. And by this time, you've had it. I mean, you've told that girl 147 times, pick up your room, sweetheart. And before you know it, you hear yourself saying, this room is an absolute disaster. I mean, if the health department would ever stumble in here, we've had it. I mean, you could have a science experiment in your bathroom. You know, you're going to grow up to be just like this room. You're going to grow up to be a slob. I mean, you're a wreck. I mean, when you grow up, no man's going to live in the house you keep. Did you hear what you just said? I mean, you just formed the expectations. And guess who's going to start growing into those? Your daughter. Or how about your son? Coming home with 4 straight F's on his paper in English. And last night, you skipped Bill Cosby to help tutor him. You can't believe it. And you hear yourself saying, son, you're so stupid. I can't believe it. I mean, 4 F's? I mean, don't you have any brains in your head? How come you're not as smart as your sister? I mean, you're just a failure. You're never going to amount to anything. As soon as they find out how stupid you are, they're going to fire you from every job you get. I mean, this has never happened in the history of our family. I don't know where you get this stuff from. And then you walk out thinking to yourself, well, I guess I expressed myself to my child. Or maybe your younger daughter comes home from her softball game and she's all excited. You can kind of hear it in her voice and in the spring in her legs as she walks down the room. And you say, well, how'd you do? And she says, well, I won 4-3. We won 4-3. And you hear yourself saying, well, did you get any good hits? I mean, did you hit any home runs? And she says to you, yeah, I hit a double and a single. Hey, you only hit a double and a single? You never even got a triple? I mean, when are you really going to start connecting with the ball? I don't know why you always disappoint me like that. Well, guess how she walks back to her bedroom? Well, when it's all said and done, we've all done this, haven't we? Have you heard yourself there? Parents have done it. Teachers do it. You know, I even think grandparents do it. Somehow, instead of blossoming our children, our words rip them apart, and they breed a future of failure. You can see our expectations because they carve out the future of our children. Little by little, our words will either lift up the winner in them, or they will be destined to be our worst hopes. Remember then, make sure that your expectations, whenever you give them to anybody at any time, are never too high or too low for too long.
Next, the last one as we wrap up part one. Expectations empower others if guided by love. If guided by love. See, what's supposed to be the background, my friends, for all of our motivations to help one another? It's supposed to be love. That is, I believe in you. I hope. I want you to become everything God wants you to become. And sometimes you need help across the ditch to become that kind of person. We call those people blossomers. Those are those people that come along in life and they have those antennas out and they're filled with love for other people. And they're saying, how can I help you break through a threshold you're in that you can't get out of right now? How can I express to you love in such a way that you'll stand up more, you'll go for it more? You know, if you thought over your whole life for a little bit, there's probably a couple people in your whole life, just a couple, maybe 2 or 3, that came along when you just weren't doing very well and loved you to death and believed in you when you had no confidence in yourself and made you stand up because the person, they believed that about you. They had some expectations for you that were, you never, about you talking to me. Can you think of those people? There's just a few people like that, aren't there? Just think where your life wouldn't be had they not come along. Had they not come along. I can name you my people. In fact, I was telling somebody here today that their parents, who was a pastor when I was a youth pastor of their church, did it to me. I said to this, their daughter, I said, had your parents not come along, I don't think I'd have made it. Why? Because they kept saying what God was doing in me and what he wanted to do through me, and it was going to be okay, and I was going to make it, and God's got his hand on you. And every time I go back down there and they'd feed us lunch on Sundays, I would go for the food, but you know what I'd go for? What was said around the fireplace right before we left and went back to college. Why? Oh, I drank it up. Why? It's dry, thirsty for it. You want to be like that too, don't you? Because on some other people's lists, my friend, it's your name. Isn't it? Should be. Should be people all the way along your life that if I asked you to write a list, who are the people blossomers in your life, you say, you know, it was Sherry when I was in 5th grade Sunday school class and she was my teacher. Man,
What does it really mean to expect the best? Every time I think about that, I remember what happened in my own life in my freshman year